respected former Chief Justice of India, Shri Tamas Kabirji, and the eminent dignitaries, the special chief guest, Advocate Sanjay Parikhji, who has been pleading a vast range of cases, and most of those public interest litigations with no private interest of his. That is what remained to be said. Free of cost, most of those, especially Narmada, but also the River Valley cases, the electoral reforms cases, the corruption cases, the GMF and city causes and drug trials and whatnot. So I owe this to him, a few words of our gratitude. And of course the Vice Chancellor, one of the most humble persons, and certainly now he has been a contributor to the interstate and international river water conflicts, which is also a subject at our hearts. I take this opportunity to pay sincere tribute to late K.C. Basuji, who was apparently both a politician and an economist, and his interest in the interdisciplinary approach to the issues certainly has brought forth this kind of endowment lecture and these kinds of themes that you have taken up all the time, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also thankful to Kaushik Basuji, professor, but also the chief economist of World Bank, as I just learned. And as he said in his letter, it may be seen by outsiders a contradiction that we, the people of the Narmada Valley and the rivers, compel the World Bank to move out of the Narmada Valley. But I'm in here to give the lecture, so thanks to him also in his absentia. I'm thankful to all those, especially Professor Sinha, whose perseverance really has brought me here for this wonderful lecture. And I know all those who have been so eminent economists to politicians who have delivered the previous lectures, and hence I feel it's a pleasure and a privilege to do it. I have my colleagues from the National Alliance of People's Movement, Samar Bagchi, Sujay Basu, our supporter, and others. I'm thankful to them also. And friends, student friends and faculty members, it was just said that it's good that I'm going to have this dialogue with the students especially. That's because we must catch you young. And I said, even if I can touch them, touch their hearts and their thoughts, it would be an achievement that I expect from this lecture. Having said this, the subject that is offered to me, ready-made, has been development versus natural resources. This dichotomy, I don't know whether it really is something that speaks of the truth and the reality, but as Mr. Rahul Bhandari in the previous session said, that it should not be that way. There shouldn't be really development versus natural resource kind of a fight or the battle that we should be fighting or we should be highlighting. And yet, my friends, the fact is, it's true that there are conflicts that are going on in the nook and corner of this country, and for that matter in the world, certainly in Asia, Africa and the South America, where the people who are the real environmentalists, whose hands and whose feet are in the resource-rich ecosystems, and those who have conserved and preserved those through their simple, self-reliant and non-exploitative life. Those are the very sections of populations which are fighting what is termed as development. And development, which is not just a term but a concept and full of umpteen number of conceptions, certainly needs to be defined as nothing else but the desirable change of our dreams. And if those are not the utopian dreams, certainly we want change, and I too want change, and you too want change. But change in what framework of values? What framework of principles? Change through what kind of technology and what processes of planning the same and transferring or harnessing or distributing and redistributing resources. These are the questions at the heart of the debate and the dialogue that is going on in this country and the world. You know very well from the elections which just finished and the results are yet to be out that from the right to left, every single party in power or in opposition has been using this term nowadays as a tantra or a mantra. See, look at their advertisements or the manifestos and you would find this. But reading in between lines and reading from the realities which are grounded in the communities, the rural and urban, we realize that nothing about what is happening in the name of development, much of it, and what is it that it is bringing to us, the citizens and the living beings of this generation and the next generations, as the earlier speakers have already mentioned. Nothing of that is really mentioned, leave aside elaborated or explained in those manifestos or their speeches. May it be Narendra Modi ji, may it be Rahul Gandhi ji. And hence it is very necessary, to say the least, that when the word development is uttered, if you think of certain symbols and indicators, what are those that you think of immediately? Do you think of a shopping mall? Do you think of a mega city? Do you think of a lane in a city which burns much more energy and one kind of power, peaking power generally, at the cost of all those who are in the darkness? Or do you really think of migration and reducing that, and the female infanticide and the mortality rates and the level of literacy and education or health and malnourishment for that matter? That's up to each one of us. And hence when the development has started being defined more and more in the materialist terms, certainly not only within our country but across the globe, we really have to think twice as to what is our conception of development. For those who are living in the urban slum communities or in the rural areas, those who are living with the natural resources which are still alive for not only themselves but others to be used, are raising a question as to whether development does not need at the foremost natural resources which are the first and the foremost capital. And leaving aside that market term of capital, but which I am using it deliberately, aren't those resources indispensable for any and every activity that goes in the name of development? If yes, are we to really show those resources on the airports and on the big posters where you would pay 1,000 rupees per night and visit those? Or are those resources looked at as the resources and the life supporting resources, not just the commodities and the capital commodities, not only for the market, may it be local or global, but for fulfilling the basic needs of the people, without which the fundamental rights which the Constitution has granted us as the birthrights could never be attained. And without which the directive principles that the state is duty bound to follow, may those be not enforceable or whatever, but still, can those ever be followed? So these questions raised are because in the name of development now, the same resources which are the life supporting resources of the farmers, of laborers, of the fish workers, of potters, of the Adivasis, Dalits, the unprotected, not unorganized, unprotected working class that forms 96% of our workers in this country, all of them live with and without which they have a crisis of survival and nothing less than that. Now, if those resources are inevitable for any and every activity that will feed us this afternoon and tonight, and that has gone into the housing that we use and the comforts that we enjoy, then will you be allowed, and should even the state be allowed, to take over those resources, to grab those resources, snatch over those through a process which would be absolutely undemocratic and which would go on without even knocking at their doors and asking them, do you approve this? If that is not done, then what is happening is the result that those who are not poor but rich in natural resources and of course the human resources, they do not have any say in development planning. Now this is against not just the Panchayati Raj system that the constitution has upheld, but everything that has evolved that kind of system and subsystem up to Article 243 of the Constitution, where the Gram Sabhas and the Ward Sabhas, or take it as Basti Sabhas, which we are asserting the rights from, have the first primacy and the power and the authority to take up the task of development planning. But exactly that is what is not followed. And as the state, the omnipotent state, which is today the privatized and corporatized state, that has an open ground which ultimately turns into battleground in most of the cases, open ground to take over the resources, of course in the name of law and in the name of economics. And that's why these two disciplines indeed come together when we think of what is happening to natural resources in the name of development and through the legitimized planning processes that go in the name of development. And here, if you see what is happening today, is not only the depletion of and the plundering of resources from the global to local marketeers and the profit mongers, but what is happening is also killing of the democratic practices, processes and also institutions. Because those are not there only in the Lok Sabhas and assemblies, mind you, where 300 of the 540 plus parliamentarians of ours are millionaires and have no right to represent the 96% of population. And the women do not have the appropriate space, which can only be attained if what we are pushing for is one woman and one man as two representatives from each constituency, the electoral constituency in the coming days. So mind you, when this is happening, we feel that the state is really dependent on the principle of eminent domain, which is the British legacy, and the act which came based on that principle, which was and which is till end of this year continues to operate, that is the Land Acquisition Act, really spells it out very clearly as to what this principle could do to the common citizens, but that was by the imperialist British powers. And today, when after 60 plus years of our independence, and the same act has been used, and now as a result of the struggles, the Singur and Nandigram and the representatives were here, and the Narmada to Brahmaputra and the coastal corridor related struggles to the urban poor struggles in the slums, that act is being changed. And yet, the new act also continues with that principle of eminent domain with some difference. Some spaces having been offered, the government projects and the public plans do not require the clear consent of the Gram Sabhas or even the Ward Sabhas, which is an unviable unit which cannot give us the face-to-face or direct democracy. So the act which now has to be brought in, because there is no level playing field amongst those who want these resources as their capital and the basis for their unlimited profit making, may it be minerals for Ambanis or the coal for Adanis or the coastal waters for the fishing industry or the nuclear power based region for the French and Russian corporates. It is therefore very clear that the people in these communities have raised not just voice but a battle. And when the new act does not claim nor does it going to be fully resolving the conflict, it is still on the paper today that there will be a social impact assessment. And all these paraphernalia that the act is going to be bringing out to us has already been experienced with regard to the environmental impact assessment. So there is law, Environmental Protection Act 1986, the Forest Conservation Act 1980. There are a number of acts, the Air Act and the Water Act, but there are also the Mining Act and the Industrial Development Act. Not just one or two, but 100 different acts all over the India, which are being used as a tool or may be a weapon to take over the resources and forcibly. Because although the hearings are given, although some kind of participation in terms of raising objections at least is there a part of that law, nothing of that sort really happens, certainly not with fairness and justice. I'll give you an example of what happened in the Raigad district of Orissa, where Jindal's company was to take over the rest of the Kelo river, where the river was already fully more or less polluted and flowing as a Kali river. But the women there became Kalis and Durgas, and they decided not to permit the next phase. And I'm saying women because the men had already given thumb impressions on the previous night before the public hearing could take place. And when the Jindal men were sitting inside along with the collector and the PCB representatives, I had to stand up as an outsider because the insiders were still coming in to get them out in the outer pendal, but there was still no level playing field. And when the women and everyone under the pressures from the women in the community certainly opposed that project, saying that first you take care of the first phase and then you talk about the next. Without that we will give our lives but not our land and not our river, the Robo river, the small little river. Then the collector came out with the answer at the end. He had the last word and he said, all of you have opposed the project and the PRO of Jindal has supported the project, but let me tell you that there are 2,000 emails received on the computer which support the project. My friends, this is the kind of impact assessment and the public hearings, and if that is so, whether in the name of environmental or social impact assessment, then nothing of the people's perspective of development, the people's participation, the people's view about how much and whether displacement is inevitable and what would happen to them and their next generation would never be heard, leave aside being resolved. So the conflicts are the ones which are wanting us to save the resources and are trying to do the same. And yet there are so many environmental crises that are on in this country. You take the Narmada along with the Uttarakhand rivers and the northeastern rivers and the river basin, which is an ecosystem which has not just the habitats but the ancient archaeological monuments and the remnants underground and the temples and mosques, but also schools, dispensaries, houses, standing crop in say 200 to 250 villages densely populated as in the case of Sardar Sarovar, and yet the state dares with false data and claims not only mislead themselves but also mislead the courts. And when the battles really are not violent battles, there are no armed struggles, although I know some party person has recently given a statement that I'm an original Maoist. I don't know what original Maoist is, so I better not comment on that. But the non-violent completely struggles over decades which have been on, and yet those are not heard or taken into that planning process. Tell you that what has happened in Uttarakhand will happen next in Narmada, will happen in Brahmaputra and so on, where the cascade of dams without leaving an inch of river, whether Alaknanda or Mandakini or Bhagirathi, and diverting the rivers into the tunnels as if those are the adolescent girls, but then the girls also react when the time comes, and so do the rivers. And these mother rivers then, which the people have their cultural practices associated with, and if those are reverting back or changing their roots, like the Kosi did, and we had to really work on the relief work for 15 days there, seeing the dead bodies coming out from the ceiling of the house where 400 people stranded for 8 full days, facing diarrhea and whatnot, but not even getting food, leave aside a boat to rescue them. When these kinds of situations arise, everyone thinks of environment, everyone thinks of ecology, and everyone thinks of the river of his or her childhood. I remember a DGP came to my house and said, पहले मैं आपका माफी मांगता हूँ क्योंकि मैंने हर बार आपके बारे में सोचा कि आप तो एंटी डेवलपमेंट हैं, आप तो विकास विरोधी हैं, आप तो राष्ट्र विरोधी भी हैं, और हम सी कोस्टल गार्ड्स in his absolutely white dress, he said that हम ही लोग हैं जो security देते हैं. I'm glad that Honorable Governor also coming from the security sector is talking about the intergenerational sustainability of not just rivers but the natural resources. So he said that my friends के मेरे गांव में जो नदी है, काली नदी, सही में उसका नाम है, कर्नाटक में है, आप जाके देखिए, वहां भी थर्मल पावर प्लांट आ रहा है, इसलिए मुझे उस नदी को बचाना है, वो तो मेरे बचपन की नदी है. So when it comes to your own doorstep, you realize, and hence these conflicts are not only the economic conflicts and not only the legal conflicts. These are the socio-political, economic, ecological conflicts. And the two worlds which don't get along and do not even have or get the opportunity to have a dialogue really encourage are compelled to fight and nothing else. You take the Krishna Basin, the oil and gas, the minerals which are removed and fulfilling every greed of some families, and you know them, and they are eating with two mouths, and yet that basin, the farmers in the Krishna Basin are really sinking with the farms, with the fishermen's farms and whatnot, and there is no one to take cognizance of. 2 crores of population is, their lives are at stake. And the livelihoods, the PCPIR, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, the Calcutta-Delhi Corridor, the Bangalore-Chennai Corridor, just 7 corridors where the MOUs are already signed with the Japanese Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Mind you, would take away how many lakh hectares of land, no one knows. But Delhi-Mumbai Corridor on the first phase is to take over 350,000 hectares of land. When the economy there is the agriculturist economy. With agri, what goes is a culture. Culture to live with resources, culture to use resources, no doubt. But unless the market spreads, unless these companies get placed in various institutions, the statutory body to the academic institutions. I'll tell you, the Indian Institute of Science gave the first place to Monsanto, and for that matter, many do. So when this happens, and when they come over to take everything, the fish and the fisheries too, what happens is that the land, irrespective of who has been living on that land since how many generations or decades, the type of land, the category of land gets changed. So the land use pattern is something that the people ask who decided it. And how is it decided? You know it very well. 180 lakh hectares of agricultural land is diverted to non-agricultural purposes within just 10 years in this country. And if it goes this way with those 7 or more corridors which are being brought out as industrial corridors, changing the agricultural land, which is 70% of population living on that land, overnight into industrial by just putting a stamp on the land titles of those people without they knowing where was the MOU signed with the Japanese banks, how many seminars in Gujarat, 60% of land of Gujarat is being given. It's not the Gandhi's paradigm, you know whose paradigm is it. So it is that kind of change overnight that the people are fighting against. And how many sand mining, for example? There are laws. There are multiple number of laws, and one fine judgment comes on 27th of February 2012, and hence the laws which were not implemented, like the Minerals Act, for example, we were fighting the battles when the act is the sand mining illegal is being thrown into the river, and the Sarovar that is being built is itself going to be finished. So not only those who pay the cost, but those who are supposed to be beneficiaries will also be paying the cost. When we bring this out, then also no attention is paid. But one fine judgment from the apex court, mind you, paves a way. And yet, when that is not implemented, we have to fight the battle, stand on the streets at the midnight and stop the trucks full of sand and take the attacks of the mafia on the office of the Narmada Bachao Andolan in order to stop that illegality. Friends, when the activism can do this, do you really need judicial activism, bureaucratic activism, political activism also to use not only the laws but also to follow the constitutional mandate under Article 48, 51, or also the Article 39C, which says that the resources need to be used, no doubt, but those should be harnessed in such a way that the wealth will not be concentrated in the handful of hands. And hence, when that is raised, it is nothing anti-development, it is nothing anti-nation, but it is for your and my benefit, needs to be understood. And yet the judiciary sometimes does not. It does not understand for various reasons. First, because not every time the constitution is referred to. Second, because whenever the Article 21 comes into the judgment, as in the Narmada judgment and many other Tehri judgment and the N.D. Jayal versus Union of India judgment on sustainability, or Vellore Municipal Corporation judgment, or the Goa Foundation's judgments, all of which we learned from our senior advocates when we started pleading ourselves in the courts, we know that in spite of that case law, what is happening on the ground is rarely investigated. Gone are the days when Justice Bhagwati or Justice Krishna Iyer were promptly and fairly appointing the commissions of inquiry to go down to earth and then give the reports, without which it is not possible. And gone are the days when the reports would be honest, truthful, and without corruption infesting those. So with the changing values and growing valuelessness in the society, I will say that all the arrangements, institutional to the academic and professional, are no doubt falling short of it. And hence, we again go back, not only go up to the courts where we have to sometimes, many times, but we have to go down to people, mobilize them and say, assert and assert your rights. And sometimes it also happens that it's not only the local battles and not even the national battles. Those become the international battles. I'm thankful to Kaushik Basuchi for suggesting even my name, which is I'm very grateful for. But I found that there are not only Joseph Stiglitz but others who have been a part of the World Bank and IMF, and as World Commission on Dams commissioners, we had over 2.5 years and nothing less than that, a beautiful exercise of global policy making by the multi-stakeholders. When we have been always for the dialogue, we found the engineers who built largest of the dams, the three gorges to the Mangala and Tarbela in Pakistan, in the Amazon Valley, wherever we went, up to Vietnam, we found that the engineers said that we knew a lot of engineering, but we did not know the social engineering. So the unanimous report of the World Commission on Dams. And this is just an example. It doesn't need to be restricted to the dams and that arena where the conflicts are the maximum. It can be related to any and every sector of not only the ecosystems but of development planning. Can there be these kinds of open dialogues where the wider forum can include even those corporates who sometimes call me to the Taj Hotel and so on, but mind you that if only they are open to discussion, calling this as closed-minded persons, we still give it to them to become open-minded and hold a dialogue. But that dialogue must start not with the activists who are known and renowned as is introduced, I feel ashamed. Because the communities are known to us, so it is our space and that is our credit. But the communities should be the first and the foremost units of planning. Unless that is done, what happens is a story of globalization, liberalization, privatization, economic policies. What is happening in the name of globalization is not Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is not Jai Jagat, everyone knows that. It means that the flow of capital, free flow of capital and the free trade that follows is taking over the resources, not just the natural resources but human resources too, the labor at the cheapest cost. Now whether that is producing e-waste and all of that and what are the impacts, social and environmental, of the projects that are coming as a result of their getting one kind of input, but the major indispensable capital, as I said, coming from the people of this country, and hence the laws of the land and the constitution of land, and not just their global economics of profit bearing, can rule and has to rule, is something that is forgotten. And that is more and more forgotten today, because whether it is in the water sector where the privatization has come up, or whether it is in the minerals, the POSCO is the best example, company coming from South Korea and taking over, and whether it is an Indian multinational like Ambani or an American multinational or a Russian or Chinese for that matter, it doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is that the monetary capital is permitted to take over whatever and to whatever magnitude at whatever cost to the people and nature. And hence when this is happening, the stories are abound. The failure of the privatization based, natural resource intensive or natural resource commodification and commercialization based projects, that never comes to the fore so easily, and hence I am referring that. Whether it is in the power sector where the Orissa tried it first, the privatization of the power sector, or whether it is in water where even Delhi tried it. You may not be knowing that in Delhi, the water utilities which were given the contract had 21 zones with 21 managers, everyone getting the monthly salary of 11 lakhs of rupees. And then the tariff goes up, and then the metering is not just the managing and the controlling water, but the inequitable sharing of the resources becomes absolutely inevitable when there is so much of economic, social, political disparity in this country. When it is the 80-20 versus 80% of our population, and that battle is on. And yesterday I was with the urban poor in Calcutta. I tell you, after my speech, when I came out, I told Sanjay Bhai today morning, because I just couldn't bear it. The mother who came to us when we were getting into the vehicle, Samarda can tell me, remind the thing of that. She just said one line, ki, जीना संभव नहीं है बेटी, जीना संभव नहीं. Neither water, not one PowerPoint, nor education, nor rationing, in spite of all kinds of acts when it was already there in the constitution as a part of the fundamental rights. That is not the urban poor but urban rich, because she is the one who is the capitalist. Without her capital of her two hands and her human labor, the city will not be built, will not be run, will not be cleaned, nor not even your toilets. And the domestic service will not be available. Live without that if you can. We must tell the urban elites and to ourselves and look introvertly and then decide what law and what constitution is getting reflected into the planning processes, even in the name of urbanization and industrialization. And that's the question that the poor are raising, and that's the demand of this. Now to say that it is the global market which we have to be a part of import-export strategies that we have to get on to and learn more and more about. We want efficient way of mass production as against the peaceful and sustainable life, not just the sustainable climate and sustainable power and sustainable water, but peaceful and sustainable life. Is it too much? It's not too much. Even today, large percentage of our people who have preserved those natural resources, the mother rivers, the forest, those are there only where the Adivasis live and live till date if they are not evicted and are granted some forest rights. But when they have done it, what is it that we have to do and what is it that we have been doing? This is a question to be asked, because when the bilaterals and the multilaterals, the World Bank, the Asia Development Bank, the African Development Bank, or the bilaterals, the US aid and so on, are not only investing their monetary resources, but they are investing their intellectual resources. And towards what end? Are they really here to serve us when they are to deplete and plunder our natural resources, minerals to fish? Are they really wanting to feed the hungry population or satiate the thirst of the thirsty population? Is that what FDI is for? Obviously not. And this you will get bluntly and crudely and rudely reported in their documents, the publicity documents to their research reports. Kindly read those. And then whether they are giving us consumerist goods, whether they are giving us lot of choice, efficiency, lot of competition, everything doesn't matter to us. Those who say that no, let us live with our resources. We have abundant of those. We have solar power, we have wind power, we have wave power, tidal wave power, we have biomass, we have human resource of 121 crores. But provided that resource is seen as invaluable. If those are priced as the land is, what happens is in front of you and me. The land is diverted to the builders and the corporates, but the urban poor do not get a 10 feet by 15 feet. The employer doesn't give the house. The person at whose service, domestic service is given, she or he doesn't give or care for a house. You sleep wherever you can and come back at 8 o'clock is the sermon that every domestic servant has to follow, whether in your house or in others' houses. So it's very necessary that we look also at this so-called global economic inflation, which tells us, and they do, to change our policies towards that end. Not only export-import based, but change it towards commodification, commercialization, even of the basic life supporting resources like water. And there the question arises, if it is so simple and the value framework is of equity, justice and
good conscience.
No, how many minutes? Leaving it to my conscience. 5 minutes. So it is very clear that what I'm saying, that when the life supporting resources of that kind are to be managed in that framework of values, which is of equity, justice, sustainability, because brotherhood otherwise will not be possible with the next generation, and socialism, lately but brought on the books of the Constitution. And the forefathers of Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar to Sardar Patel, I must take that name now, but also Rajendra Prasad Babu, every one of them agreed with the Gandhian economic ideals and the freedom movement in the background and directly contributing. Shahid Bhagat Singh, Justice Singhvi has quoted him in one of the judgments. What a wonderful piece it is, you all must read it. He talks about non-violence as the persevering and sustaining strategy for radical transformation. he talks exactly what a number of activists have been talking today. And if all of them, therefore, with Subhash Babu to Rabindranath Tagore were here, they would not just sing songs of the natural resources, Muktadhara or whatever, not just the place, but they would have been together. And with Karl Marx also would have joined hands with each other to save not only this country, but also the planet. Because after all, the same economic principles. The decentralization that only can counter and challenge the central accumulation, even the worse than the primitive accumulation of resources. The same principle that would uphold the first primacy to the populations which live with the resources. The same principle of ownership of means of production. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar highlighted that through his struggle in Maharashtra on the Chaudhar Talab. Gandhi did the same thing through Gram Swaraj. And who doesn't know about the Karl Marx theory? And yet in today's politics and today's economics, all of that is lost. Think of what are the issues that are being raised in the inter-party debates from the diocese and in the manifestos through the electoral politics. And hence, my friends, it is not that the natural resources are fighting against development. The cattle cannot raise a voice, nor can the rivers. They are not crying halt. Who are crying halt? Those who know that there are alternatives, that there is no alternative is a facade in favor of the global and private players who gain through that resources and that technology and that kind of market, as against their own markets of the hawkers in Calcutta, of the fish worker women who go and sell the fish, of those who bring the pots to your doorstep through water, but not the bottled water, because that depletes and finishes off the aquifers the generations old. So when they have the alternatives, and they have been using those, the solar power, which is used to dry everything, instead of giving them a further technological input, not saying no to science and technology, but giving them little further technological input and the little legal right, not only to forest and the minor produce and only the individual forest land holdings, but the community rights, which is not granted. Even if the act came in 2006, the community rights to the Adivasis who have that kind of experience and the tradition of communitarian life is not granted, because they know that individualization of the forest and the rights would enable them, if not today, tomorrow, to take over those forest lands irrespective of the forest conservation acts. So there are conflicts amongst the laws, there are conflicts amongst the perspectives, there are conflicts over the technologies, and there are of course conflicts over the development planning process which are to be developed. And hence these are the conflicts which are making us look at what is happening and look backward and look forward. Looking forward, I will tell you, the Western Ghats and many eco-sensitive regions will be finished if they go with the pace and with the technology that is being used today. 200 megawatts is the requirement of power today of 2 districts in Maharashtra, Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg. And yet 30,000 megawatt power generation is planned through maximum of thermal power projects and some nuclear power projects on that, in that eco-sensitive zone. 2,000 megawatt is the requirement of electricity and all other sources of renewable included of power in the northeast states, and yet 68,000 megawatt worth power generation is planned. So look at the space and the pace that they are occupying, and that is going to lead to destruction and devastation both. The African countries, when they face it, we realize, but not when Aila to Leher, the kind of cyclones, the climate change with the melting glaciers, the Uttarakhand kind of disasters, and everything that is coming to give us more and more iniquitous distribution of resources. We don't still think of the decentralization, and through that creating a balance between development and sustainability, equability, and through that justice. And hence, take course to law, take recourse to courts, we respect the judiciary, but when there is clear, crude and rude corruption, misuse of resources, both natural and monetary, going into the planning processes, please don't fold your hands and say with false faith, more than scientific credit, that everything that is going on in the name of development has to go on, because it will go on, but we will then be left nowhere. So hence, it is not just the legal justice, but the human justice and social justice that should matter to us, and that is what should be the first and the primary goal of not just the small communities, but the sovereign India that we all belong to, which is abundant and bountiful resources, but we have so much that is going against our own constitutional values. Thank you very much.